Anyway,
Kingdom of Heaven is a movie where the good guys lose. No two ways about it. Mm-hmm.
Well, no, but dude, see, I disagree with that because, as Nate said, I don't think they pick a side. I don't think they pick a side of who's good or bad.
Well, I was gonna say
the protagonist,
they lose Jerusalem, but Balian as a character gets what he wants.
I think he's the protagonist. I don't think that Nate, wouldn't you agree? I think you pointed out earlier. I don't think that they pick a side between the Christians and the Muslims. I think Balian is the protagonist.
You have to admit that
we followed his perspective.
They centered the movie a little bit more around the
movie.
Christians.
Oh well, yeah, but I don't think that. But I don't think they literally. I don't think they
if it was taken a totally neutral perspective as far as who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist, not necessarily who's good and who's evil, but who's the protagonist.
The Christians
and who's
are the
antagonists.
Yeah.
If it would have been balanced, if it would have been like protagonist versus protagonist, then you would have had the same amount of characters on the Muslim side.
Yeah. I would say that Balian is the protagonist. I wouldn't divide it up into like Christians and Muslims. I would say that Balian is the protagonist, and then you have this antagonist, the main antagonist, in Guy. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's a Christian
but through the whole movie, the question is, will they save Jerusalem?
Yes.
No, yeah, and I think that conflict between these two characters is so it's surrounded by this overall conflict.
Yeah, but anyways, at the end of the movie, literally, they lose Jerusalem. Balian goes home.
I don't think that's a negative though.
Oh no, for sure it's not a negative. It's not a negative, but
it's a good ending.
I'd say the climax, if you're talking about the siege of Jerusalem, I'd give it a 9.
Yeah. All right. Well,
and then, so just to wrap the positives up, because obviously you could tell we had a lot of great things to say about
I have
this
one
movie.
more negative, so yeah.
Yeah, but we'll move on to the negatives in a second.
Okay.
But the reality is, I know it feels like if you've never seen this movie, it's like we're jumping around a lot. It's because there are so many cool dynamics in this movie, and I wish I could go down every single path and like explain it to you. But the best thing is to just watch it.
You just gotta watch it.
The interplay.
Yeah, I'd say the dynamics is one of the best parts.
Like when you talk about good movies, in my mind, I'm measuring it up to this movie because it was done so freaking well. So with that in mind, let's talk about the negatives.
I want to hear a negative of yours.
So here's my negative, and we're gonna have a fun time talking about this one. But the cringy one-liners.
Oh yeah, It's been a long time.
That's honestly the reason I have the screenplay's a little bit lower for me is because of these. There's a lot of cringy ones.
Here's the funny thing. Balian says all of them, basically.
Yeah, Balian says all of them.
So, except
Sibylla says a few.
I once fought 3 days with an arrow through my testicle.
And then it's like, it just like flashes the three people's faces as they're like...
Dude, the I don't understand.
Why wouldn't he pull it out?
There's some lines that they just say it and you're just like...
Yeah.
Did he just say that?
Like, at the one point, Balian just, like, looks at Sibylla, and she's like, what? And he's like, it's been a long time since I've seen a woman eat.
That's a negative for me.
And she's like...
Another thing about... I mean, I know I said Eva Green gives a great performance, but honestly, Eva Green and Orlando Bloom have, like, zero chemistry in this movie. It's just... That's just
truly.
They had no chemistry, bro. That's a negative for me. The romance between Balian and Sibylla was a mistake. I guess it had to. I don't know about like the writing. The writing of it's pretty bad. The chemistry is bad. It's very cringeworthy. It could have been better. I mean, it works for the movie. Like it works as part of the story, but the acting of it, the chemistry's bad.
You know what's so funny to me is that in a lot of the scenes where the weird, where a lot of the weird lines happen, it's almost as if the actors went into the scenes knowing only their lines and their cues, and like they knew nothing else. It's because sometimes they have the most genuine reactions to stuff. They're just like, what?
There's just some lines in this movie that are like, what in the world was he thinking? Like, what does it mean when she says before they get together, Balian and Sibylla, she's like, in the East, between people there's only light. Like what the heck does that mean?
What does that mean?
It's like that's why I don't like that's why I think the writing of that whole romance in that one section of the movie is bad.
We have to hear the whole line. She says, I'm not here because I'm bored or wicked. Yeah. I'm here because in the East, between two people, there is only light.
Like,
what does that even mean?
That makes no sense.
The build up of the first part of it's like, yeah.
You're like,
yeah. And
yeah.
you're like, what?
What does she mean in the East?
It's like I guess like if you had to break down her line, it's like, there are no rules over here, and we can just enjoy each other.
No, but dude, Nate, I've heard you agree with me that the romance is kind of cringe.
So I get again. Here comes my dichotomy here. From a writing standpoint, it was necessary. From a history standpoint,
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
But
just
all
like
right,
the writing.
obviously, history-wise, it didn't really happen in the movie. I disagree. It works.
It was necessary for the plot.
No,
I
but
think
no,
it
no,
adds
I said it was
interest.
I
and
agree it's
conflict
necessary
in
for the
movie.
plot, but dude, the writing of it's
No,
not
it's
great.
fine. It fits in with the rest of the
You're
movie.
just
It's not the best love story I've ever seen in my life, but then again, it's not the worst.
What
love
about the
story.
chemistry?
It's
What do you
a-
think about the chemistry?
Between the actors?
Yes.
It's fine. It's enough.
Oh.
It's not
Yeah,
horrible.
I'd say
it's
a very
cringeworthy, bro.
it's a very Ridley Scott like love.
No, I
It's
think he
more
did it much
it's more
better.
based off of like the facts and like the intrigue of the situation, less off.
It works
actually
for the story. It's
loving
just
each
not
other.
very well executed.
Let's talk about the cringy lines a little bit more. Because I'm not done
So
with
y'all
that.
want to talk about the cringy lines. I don't want to like hate on them.
I'm not done with the cringy lines because
Okay, there's
we've
lots.
got the one where he's like, we got to talk about the one where it's like, you think that because you make a man a knight, it makes him a better fighter.
And then he's like,
Dun 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 dun.
Yes.
and it's like, okay, I guess he really thinks that.
And then another thing that I think is funny as far as the cringy lines is how during the siege of Jerusalem, he's got this huge plan drawn up with all these. It's like Home Alone, basically, with all these traps he's got set for the Muslims. But his command for every single one is the word fire. And so, like...
Oh, no, you gotta say how he says it.
I love him like looking like I imagine him like on a whiteboard with his troops, and he's like, the first time I say fire, you're gonna set it up by pouring the oil on them. The second time I say fire, don't get it confused. Don't shoot the ballista yet. I want you to pour the oil or let the oil on fire, because he says it like 10 times. And if I were a soldier, I'd be like, which fire?
No,
are
we
we on?
we have to also, because the way he says fire is very funny to me. We have to all we have to all say it on 3. All right.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Fire! And it's the same way he says it in Pirates of the Caribbean too. So it's very like Orlando Bloom fire.
Yeah, no. Now that leads me into another negative. If I must,
Here we go.
If
John.
I must,
God.
I know
Oh my
I'm just being a
gosh.
buzzkill here.
You are. This is like
What's
so
the
good,
negative?
bro. No, my negative here is that they built. Or so I get that they say that Balian was like a man at arms and stuff, and that he would he rode on horse in battles and stuff, but. Literally, we get one training sequence of him with a sword, and then he's all of a sudden like some master swordsman, and he knows how to defend it. And all of a sudden, by the end of the movie, he knows how to all of a sudden like build fortifications and defend a whole city.
It did say that he was an engineer.
I know. I got that part, but still, he's portrayed to be a bit inexperienced. Like,
Well,
he's not
I mean,
like a man of war.
The movie's already 3 hours long.
Yeah.
They had
couldn't do it.
That's more of a nitpick for me, but it was a little bit unbelievable. It was a little bit
Something
like
had to give.
okay,
You could sprinkle in an anime style training.
See, I'm better off without it. Like, I'll assume he's good at that kind of thing.
No, this is a nitpick. I'm just saying they could have maybe built up his like warlike nature a little bit more.
They
throughout
said,
the movie.
well, there's the line with the German guy. Have you been at war?
Yeah. I like that.
Well,
oh my gosh, this isn't a negative, but it's just a disappointment that there's these cool side characters in the beginning. There's this guy from like Africa, and then there's this dude from Germany, and there's another dude who dies on the shipwreck. But the guy from Africa and the guy from Germany are so cool, and they die in the forest.
They're literally like the cool, like you see them and you're like, I already like these characters. And then like the first battle scene, he gets an arrow through the throat, and you're like, no! You're like through the first.
Now my brother, who's in med school, would be hating on that. The realist.
I don't think you have to go to med school to know that an arrow through the trachea would kill you.
No, but it would kill you right away, pretty much. You wouldn't be able to walk around and kill people.
It's still awesome, though.
No, it is awesome.
Like, literally, these two characters are so cool, and they die so quickly, which kind of gives, like, a Game of Thrones vibe. You're like, they're dead now, you know? So, like, that's kind of cool. But, honestly, my only negatives for the movie is what I said about Bailey not growing. And that's about it. That's other than that.
I once fought 3 days with an arrow.
And then the decision that he has to make. Those are my two things.
So my big negatives are the character of Balian, multiple, kind of all around. It was not a great. I don't think he was a great character. I don't think the writing of the romance was good. The chemistry wasn't good. The acting of it wasn't very good.
All right, moving on.
And then my nitpick was that I think they should have built the character of Balian up more as like a warlike, kind of like an experienced war veteran, in order to like make the Battle of Jerusalem more realistic.
There is no humor in this movie either, but it's because it's a very dramatic movie. I think there's no place. There's
honestly, this isn't a negative, but I think there could have been more. Maybe a few.
Well, there's one part in the movie that makes me laugh.
And the testicle line's kind of funny.
No, it's more like what?
Oh, when the guy's peeing downstream, maybe.
That's a little bit.
And he's
funny.
like, "Stop
That's
peeing
funny,
downstream." And
Yeah, but there's this scene that makes me laugh unintentionally when he slaps Balian during his knighting ceremony, and he's like dying, so his proprioception is off, and so he almost hits the Hospitaller, and he has to kind of like dodge it.
But like it like zoomed in, he's like,
he's like, what was that? And I don't know, that cracks me up.
I just have more negatives than y'all. Yes. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to feel bad for.
Those are my only negatives. Okay. Like that one thing is really the only thing.
I just don't like this movie as much as they.
Just the cringy one-liners for me.
I like everything else about the movie. I think it's really.
Please don't hate me in the comments.
Hate on John in the comment section. Dude, hate on him so hard.
Speaking of the comment section, we've had so many comments on our videos.
It's because I haven't been.
The CEO of YouTube called me yesterday. He said I'm breaking the algorithm. He's saying they can't sustain the load.
Even all the movie makers haven't thought of the things we've like said so far. So it's like throwing the whole movie making industry into turmoil.
Yeah, I think. But no, for real though, I do like this movie, and I'll give it a good rating.
All right, let's go ahead and give it our rating.
No. We got to go into themes first.
Themes.
We're not.
Yes. What are the themes of the movie?
Ratings at the end. Oh yeah. Well, I'll go first if you want me to. The theme I take away from it is redemption of the character of Balian. Now, while like I said, I don't like his character that much, I do think he does experience some like redemption, and by going to Jerusalem, he's kind of aimless before that, and then once he reaches Jerusalem, he starts to he doesn't grow enough. I think that is a negative, but he does grow somewhat, and he goes through all these different experiences, and obviously fights in the siege of Jerusalem, and he kind of learns that he has to kind of move on, and he can't just dwell in his misery, and he's kind of redeemed at the end by He ends up being a hero, He saves the people of Jerusalem from certain death, when people like Guy, who really were responsible for them, totally, forsook them, basically. So I love I think one of the themes is redemption.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it's a very story-based movie, so it's less about themes, more about telling a story. But I
don't think so. I think it's very thematically rich.
I think one of the really good... one of the very prominent features about the movie, because Orlando Bloom struggles with his religion throughout the whole movie. A lot of it's is God really with me? Are we really fighting for God and everything? And the kind of conclusion of it is virtue. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's right or anything, but it's a very obvious theme in the movie is the Hospitaller says what you decide to do every day will make you a good man or not. And in the end, when he surrenders Jerusalem, he sees Sibylla and he's like, your brother's kingdom was here and here. And his heart and his basically saying...
I just got chills when you said that.
Yeah, it was saying that...
Then you laughed at it. But it can't be certain.
But the thing is it was a good idea is that yes, Jerusalem fell, but... And then also it goes back to the decision Balian made. Yes, Jerusalem ended up falling, but Jerusalem is a kingdom of conscience or nothing. Yeah.
I do think
he maintained the virtue.
I think the virtue thing goes along well with it since it is a movie about knights.
Yes.
This is a movie that centers very much on knighthood.
And then you also have the contrast of Guy and Renaud, who is what he's trying to not become.
Yeah, they're the knights that are not virtuous at all,
and he's random people.
But he's not even a knight at all at the beginning of the movie, and that's part of his kind of story. Cool, that's a cool part of his character arc, is he goes from being this poor blacksmith that's in France to being a knight and one of the barons of the kingdom of Jerusalem. And I think that whole aspect of the movie is embodied when in the line that Godfrey says. He says, in France, a man who had not a house is in Jerusalem, the master of the city, and he who was the master begs in the gutter.
All right, let's let Nate talk about some virtues.
Yeah, Nate, what's the theme?
Well, I was going to say...
What do you think is the overarching theme?
I was going to say exactly what Noah said, which is virtue over religious fervor.
Yeah.
Since I've seen too much religion in the eyes of too many murderers.
The Hospitaller.
Saladin embodies this. For the record,
Saladin.
I was about to say, for the record, I know it's Saladin, but the English transcription for it is Saladin. Saladin embodies this too when he decides to let everybody go out of the city because his religion would have told him, to kill all of them. But he did not. So
I am not those men.
So he so there's this common virtue between the two religions that they share that it harps on. It's almost as like legalism in a way, where it's just follow the rules and you'll be fine, instead of listen to God's voice type thing. I'm not going to pass judgment on whether that's right or wrong, but that is the theme of the movie.
Well, I think it was cool that they showed what the Crusaders, what their mindset was. We may not agree with it.
It's very.
We may not agree with their theology, but that's probably.
But it was accurate. Yeah. Like when they're like, God wills it. It's like, does God does he will it? Probably not. But that's what they thought.
I don't think God was up there saying, "Oh yeah, Crusaders go kill people."
Yeah, but that's the funny part. Like they really believed it. So they were. So.
Anyway, we can talk more about the
history
section.
I've been waiting for this because now
we're going to talk about the history.
Now we're going to talk about the history.
Oh man, I did some research too, bros.
We're going to talk about the history and gear up because I've got a lot to talk about. So, where to even start, man? Let's start with the Crusades because there's a lot of misconception about the Crusades, especially among the Christian community, because there's this idea that it was purely a holy war, that the Pope just decided that I use the term we. It's like when you have a favorite football team and you say we even though you're not on the football team.
Yeah.
Decided that Christians needed to go on this rampage. Like, people, like even in the movie, I think is an excuse for land and money and to go rape, kill, and burn a bunch of stuff. Which certainly did happen. But the reason that the Crusades started is because this radical kingdom of Muslims called the Seljuk Turks invaded the Byzantine Empire, which was the remnants of the Roman Empire. And they killed, raped, burned a lot of stuff.
Was that the remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire?
Yeah.
When it split? Yeah.
Right. So the Byzantine Empire. And they beat them at this battle called Manzikert. And the Battle of Manzikert took the Holy Land out of Jewish control for the first time in a long time. And it wouldn't go back for a while, as you probably know. And so a lot of atrocities were committed against Jews and Eastern Orthodox Christians who were in the area. Now, the Byzantine Empire is worried about Constantinople getting taken by the Seljuk Turks. So he's worried about his power base. And so he decides to do the unthinkable and appeal to Western Europe, which is their enemies, for help. And so when the Pope gets the call from Alexius Comnenus, he thinks to himself, I have been waiting for an opportunity to unite the Eastern and Western churches. And if I save the Eastern Church, this could be an opportunity to do this. So the Pope does have his own motive on this. He's like, I'm going to unite the churches and save Constantinople. And the other thing he wants to do is the church has been trying forever to get all of the kingdoms of Europe to stop warring with each other because they think it's unchristian. Because there's been this conflict between the knightly class and the priestly class for a long time in medieval history. And so the papacy gets this great idea of tying the two things together and being like, instead of killing fellow Christians, why don't we go war somewhere else so that we can they were trying to get them to stop killing each other, basically. And so they went out preaching about saving their brothers in the East and liberating the Holy Lands from foreign rule. So a big misconception is that this was Arab land, that this was theirs, it belonged to them, it did not belong to them. And that gets into a lot of the theory behind like whose land belongs to who, But it's not like it was like their ancestral homeland, heartland that was getting, torn out by the Christians. It was a frontier for them too. And they had taken it because it was their holy places also. Which is funny because Jerusalem is the quintessential holy place of the Christian faith, and it is the number 3 city for the Muslims.
Yeah,
Mecca, Medina being the first two. So it's funny that they were so driven on that. Like obviously the Christians didn't have a lot of drive to take Mecca and Medina.
Yeah.
Although Renaud de Chatillon did try. We'll have to get to that later. But anyway, so that was when the First Crusade started, and a lot of killing did happen, but it was out of religious devotion and a perceived need to liberate their brothers in the East. Those were the motives. For a long time, this was disputed by scholars, but then Jonathan Riley Smith, who is considered the premier scholar on the Crusades, did this very famous study where he went in, found a bunch of different letters that Crusaders had written home, and compiled them, and found that in almost all of them, the purpose that they were there was to please God and to save their brothers.
Well, I mean, really, you just have to think about it. And, like obviously I don't know as much about history, but, like, you just have to think about why would these rich knights, they have everything they can need. Why would they take, it's not like now, they get on a ship, they go all the way to Jerusalem, risking death, and fight these wars against these endless armies of Saracen to liberate Jerusalem, which becomes the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which is a part of a lot of different other countries. Mm-hmm. What do they have to gain for that other than pleasing God? Mm-hmm. They say land, money. What kind of land or money are they going to get? They have that, but there is no and same for the Saracens. The Saracens didn't do it for money either. This was a holy war. This was over religion.
Yeah,
that's where it gets controversial, though, because why would God doesn't ever in the Bible?
No, it doesn't. But during the time,
kill people in my name,
During the time, the word of the Pope was considered to have come directly from God.
It still is.
Yes, in the Catholic faith. Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So whether it was right or wrong, these people believed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They believed.
I don't personally agree with their motives, but
part of their motives. Not only did they believe that it was God's will for them to liberate their brothers in the East, they also believed that their land was under immediate threat, and it was.
Yeah.
It was because Salah ad-Din was quoted as saying that he wanted to take his jihad as far as Rome and Paris.
That's what, so they were just moving us.
So this was also a defensive move by the Pope to try to unite Western Europe to save it from subjugation, because he also knew if the kingdoms of Western Europe remained divided, that they would have no chance to take on this uniting Muslim force that was coming. And by the way, from the year 800 till, 1099, when the Crusades started, Muslim conquerors took over 2/3 of the Christian world.
I have a question. Crazy. What year was what year did the Christians take Jerusalem?
1099.
1099. Okay.
1099. Yeah, 1095 started the first crusade, but 2/3 of the Christian world. At that point,
it's crazy.
Peace was no longer an option.
That's crazy.
Peace was no longer an option, and the Pope and the Church knew this, and they knew they had to unite Western Europe in order to save the rest of their land from being subjugated.
Imagine if, someone took 2/3 of America. 2/3 of America, they took it. Mm-hmm. And then we went and reclaimed the rest of it, and they were they attacked us. I mean, that's crazy. They took 2/3 of Christian land, and they were trying to take it back out of defense and out of trying to take their land back.
I have a question. So the reason I asked about that date was because they actually referenced that in this movie. They talk about how 100 years before the Christians massacred all the Muslims in the city.
A massacre did happen in Jerusalem. Absolutely. One chronicler, obviously this is hyperbole because this is not physically possible, but he said that there was a temple within the city that you were knee deep in blood, which. Just for reference, medieval chroniclers used hyperbole a lot. Muslim and Christian chroniclers, they would be the bodies were piled so high that the army could not physically get past them.
So I have some questions about the historical, specifically the events in this movie. So is the siege, to your knowledge, is the siege of Jerusalem portrayed pretty accurately? However, I know we wouldn't know exactly how it went down, but
yeah, I was about to say you would have to get into some pretty nitty gritty specifics that.
Just from what you've read,
yes.
though.
Let me just say yes.
Yeah.
But what was the train of thought that I was on before that? I was talking about the first crusade.
So I didn't mean to get you.
No, it's fine. I was going to say the hyperbole, and then I was also going to mention that when you hear the term the Crusades, you hear about these, which are called the numbered Crusades. But there was also Crusades in the Iberian Peninsula, because the Moors took over a lot of Spain. Actually, they took over 90% of Spain. And there was only this tiny little part in the mountains that remained Christian, and they ended up pushing and taking it all the way back. Fun fact, King Fernando, who ended up sending Christopher Columbus,
Oh, wow.
He sent Christopher Columbus to the New World the same year that they took back the last city. and ended the Reconquista. There was also crusades that happened in the Baltic region against the pagan peoples there.
Speaking of the number of crusades, this movie takes place in between the second and the third crusade.
That's right.
And this is technically not during.
It's not a crusade.
Yeah, it was a very tumultuous period in the crusading history.
I think we could touch on the historical inaccuracy. So in the movie, they allude to the fact that, and talk about a lot, how Saladin and Baldwin are like, hell, they're trying to create a peace between them. And Nate, you said that is not historically accurate.
So let's talk about this period, because there was a lot of wars that happened between the Second and Third Crusade. So First Crusade, they take Jerusalem, they establish the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli. Those are the Crusader states. And eventually Cyprus will be added. But during the Second Crusade, which seeks to expand on those gains, they are rebuffed. And so after that defeat, they are left on a very defensive foot. Now you have to, we were talking about this earlier, but this was such difficult warfare.
When did the Second Crusade end?
I don't know what year it ended.
Okay, but how long was it?
It lasted like a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and if not for the Templars, they would have been completely destroyed, by the way. That's another story, though. But I was going to say, this was extremely difficult warfare for the Christians, because they had to ship everything overseas. They had very limited resources. They had, basically the scraps off the table from Western Europe compared to the Muslims, who had literally their entire armies. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, they call it outre-mer, across the sea, by the way. And the only pressure that the kingdom had to send supplies was cultural pressure, because it was seen as a very good thing to do that. But almost all the knights who went there lost everything. They had nothing to gain by fighting these wars. Mostly they died. It would be like going to the New World, yeah, you might carve out a piece of land for yourself, but you were risking so much.
Or going to help Ukraine or something.
Yeah, you were risking so much. And if you look at a map of the Crusader states, it was tiny. It was tiny. It's not like they had these huge swaths of land that they conquered.
But John's right. Tell us about
that inaccuracy, because you said that there was never that Baldwin and Paladin were never looking to make permanent.
Okay, so Saladin comes on the scene, Saladin, and he's one of the greatest generals of all time. Honestly, he reunites. He conquers lots of different. So he starts by making war on the Muslims, and he's from Iraq. He conquers Syria. And he will go on to found a hugely influential dynasty called the Ayyubids.
Yeah, at the beginning of the movie, the hospital was like, these Saracens, as you called them, have united in Arabia.
And so
Syria.
he starts the Ayyubid Caliphate, which is extremely powerful, and it surrounds the kingdom. And so there's this period of warfare that's happening, right? And King Baldwin IV comes to the throne during this tumultuous time. And during this time, Saladin launches this full-scale invasion, bringing tens of thousands of troops with him. And 16-year-old leprous Baldwin IV goes out to meet him, even though most of his army got destroyed when William Longsword was ambushed and killed north of Tripoli. And so he has the Knights Templar. He has
Baldwin, you're talking about.
Actually, Balian of Ibelin was there. In real life, that's crazy. This was way before the events of the movie.
We'll talk about his character.
But Balian of Ibelin was there, and he had the Knights of Ibelin, and it's referenced in the movie. In the movie, it's called the Battle of Montgassard.
That was one of the battles against one lord against another.
No, yeah, he was literally down there fighting. Yeah, that's pretty funny. But
oh my word!
But they were outnumbered by a massive amount. But
the Christians were.
Yes,
I thought. Baldwin said he defeated Saladin.
He did.
Yes.
He did. But
not that time though.
William.
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did.
He was just very outnumbered.
Yeah.
Who got massacred?
So hold on, I'm trying to remember the chronicler who William of Tyre recorded the battle, and the way he describes it, it's no less than miraculous.
My God was with him.
It really was.
So the Christians massacred the Muslims.
Yes.
Okay.
They drove him out. Saladin was forced to flee on a racing camel in order to get away from being killed.
So then the period after this is what I'm interested to hear.
Well, I'm getting it. So I just got to that. So after Montgassard, there's some peace in the kingdom, but Saladin is gearing up for another invasion. And so, in order to postpone this, they strike a treaty. And that's because Outremer is exhausted and Saladin's forces are also exhausted. And so they both need time to regroup and get more troops. So basically, neither of them have a choice. They have to sign this peace treaty. And it's supposed to last 2 years and then it'll expire. That is the treaty that they refer to in this movie. But they cast it in the movie as being like them being these peacekeepers, where they're like, we've got a peace. It's like a permanent peace.
But they both knew it was going to end.
It was a timepiece for 2 years, and then a Muslim raid happened after it expired, and then Renaud de Chatillon led a counter raid. And then that made all.
So he really is framed as.
So basically, all the stuff about a new world, a better world, that's all bullcrap.
It is bullcrap.
Well, also, like, now I feel bad for Renaud. Like, he's made out to be this blood frenzied maniac.
Now, speaking of Renaud, though, I've also read in a little bit of my very preliminary research on this history of this movie that in the movie they actually kind of decrease his role in the whole
Renaud de Chatillon.
Let me put it this way. All right, so in the movie they make Guy more of an autonomous villain by lessening the role of Renaud de Chatillon. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
No, so Renaud de Chatillon, the only role that he had in this war that happens, which ends in the loss of Jerusalem, is him leading this counter raid.
But like,
so maybe they just they didn't. I mean, they did show him massacring.
Well, in the movie, he just during the peace.
In the movie, he's just the guy who kills civilians.
Yeah, or just kills like Saladin's sister for no reason. Yeah, he's like this blood-frenzied maniac, and in real life, he's just leading a counter.
And not only that, he had a lot of reason to hate the Muslims because he rotted in a Muslim prison for 10 years before.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So his character is rather. So his character is portrayed a little bit.
Yeah.
He's more
Justice for Renaud.
Yeah. So he. Like, what the crap, man? And so, after the counter raid, the Muslims took it and ran with it, and a new invasion happened.
Tell us more about the character. All right, so we got to talk about the character of Balian.
Yeah.
You mentioned him. All right, so in the movie, Balian is obviously portrayed as a French blacksmith who is not a knight. His father comes. They go to Jerusalem. He becomes a knight. He ends up, defending Jerusalem very heroically.
So this
in real life, he was obviously not a French blacksmith.
This discussion is a lot like if anybody's ever seen The Last Kingdom. They base it on a historical character, but like nothing is known about this guy at all. And it's kind of the same thing. Like we know where Balian was, like in pivotal battles and stuff like that. But it's not like there's like a biography.
But true, he was already.
Let me answer the question. He was born in Outremer as a nobleman, raised by his father, and fought by the king's side. He did not lead the defense of Jerusalem.
Or fallen off.
I thought he did lead the defense of Jerusalem.
No, that didn't happen either.
He was there, though.
He was there, yes.
He fought.
He was there, yes. And that's actually, I was watching a special feature, that's why they picked him, is because they literally just found a nobleman who was there at the loss of Jerusalem, and they're like, let's do this guy. But basically everything you see in the movie, it's a fictional
William Monahan
character.
was just like flipping through, I gotta get some for this. Who's gonna be my main character?
Balian of Ibelin, yeah. But as I mentioned, Balian of Ibelin was present 10 years, or 15, 12 years earlier at the Battle of Mont. He started supporting the Leper King, and so he knew him since he was really young.
So the character,
their relationship is actually.
So the character of Godfrey is completely fictional.
Well, no, I mean.
He had a father.
No, but his father was not.
I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know much about that guy.
No, that's just what I read. The character of Godfrey is a fictional character.
I don't know.
The character, the Hospitaller, is obviously he doesn't have a
name. Well,
he
is a Hospitaller, but
I know, but like his
dude, we got to talk about it hints at this in the movie. There was this huge conflict between the Knights Hospitaller and the Knights Templar about whether to go to war or not, and. I've told y'all about this, about the sword fight and everything between the Grandmasters, but you notice they actually allude to this.
I didn't hear that.
No, I noticed it because if you look, when the court is like at arms with each other. You've got that one side. You've got the Templars on the one side, and then you have the Jerusalemites and the Hospitallers on the other side, and they're yelling at each other. And that's actually kind of what happened, which is so cool.
Now, talk a little bit more about the relationship between Sibylla and Guy, because in the movie they're portrayed as very antagonistic towards one another. Sibylla does not like Guy. In real life, I have read they were actually very fond of one another.
So let's talk about Guy de Lusignan. Guy de Lusignan started his military career in southern France, fighting alongside his brother against Richard the Lionheart, who was trying to subjugate southern France to maintain the the Angevin dynasty. Richard the Lionheart was in a tight battle with his father Henry to get succession. And he learned all of his military tactics by being a very brutal tyrant to the people of southern France. And Guy de Lusignan was fighting back against this, and he was sort of this like Robin Hood type rebel with his brother, always running around with his merry band in the woods and like ambushing them and stuff. Yeah, I'm talking about Guy. And so later he went to the Holy Land and kind of fashioned himself as this great knight. Baldwin knows he's going to die soon, and so he's thinking, I have to find a husband for my sister because I need a strong king.
Older sister, right?
Yeah, older sister. I need a strong king. I actually wrote a story about them, but anyway, I need a strong king to defend the kingdom once I'm gone. And so he settles on Guy de Lusignan. He thinks he's a great guy. He thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he sets up the marriage. So her mother didn't set up the marriage. Baldwin set up the marriage.
And she was married before, correct?
No.
To William Longsword.
I actually got that wrong. I remember the real facts. But the real facts is that they were set to be married, but they were not married. And Baldwin got to know the guy, and he realized that he wasn't an idiot, but he was just a little bit soft and persuadable and not the strong guy he wanted. So real life Guy was just he was a little bit noodly.
Yeah.
He was a little bit noodly. He was a little bit deceivable.
Where did Baldwin V come from?
Oh, that was the kid that died.
I know, but you said she was not married.
So then he broke up the marriage, right? Problem was, she loved Guy. They were deeply in love and wanted to be together. So Baldwin goes off and finds this ultra Chad guy named William Longsword, who William Longsword fought for Henry V. No, excuse me, that's wrong. Henry III. Second? Henry II. The Old King, if you're into that history. They call him the Old King. He fought alongside this really cool guy named William Marshall. I read a biography on William Marshall, and William Longsword was in it a lot. So this guy knew his stuff. Like, him and William Marshall fought off the French, like, single-handedly in northern France for a ton of years. It was super cool. Anyway, William Longsword was a Chad. And so he wanted to marry him. Unfortunately, William Longsword went on a raiding expedition that did not go too well, and it killed him and all of his men.
Come on, man.
So now Baldwin's dying, and he can't keep Guy and Sibylla apart, like physically. Like he can't stop it from happening, and so he dies. They marry.
The rest
stuff happens. The rest is history.
Though, so Baldwin V is the son of Guy?
Is the son of William Longsword.
So she was
married to William Longsword.
Before Guy?
Yes.
That's okay. I thought you said no.
So they were engaged. Sorry. They were engaged. He broke the engagement. She married William Longsword. He died. They got remarried.
I see.
But she had a son with William Longsword while she was engaged.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. But she was involved with Guy.
No, she was married to William Longsword.
So it was like Guy. No, it was like Guy, but then he broke it off, and it was William Longsword, and they got married. But then
they had a kid.
But then William died, and then she got back.
So it is accurate in the movie that Baldwin V is not the son of Guy.
Yes, that is accurate. Yeah, he's the son of William Longsword.
But it's inaccurate that Sibylla and Guy did not like each other.
Yes, that's inaccurate. They were madly in love.
And obviously, it's not true that Bailey and Sibylla never got together.
They never even probably even saw each other. They probably looked at each other once and were like, it's like Noah pointed this out to me because he's read The Lord of the Rings, like Aragorn and Arwen, where they like see each other.
They hung out like.
I've also read that so it portrays Sibylla, in the movie as kind of this Eastern, kind of exotic.
Well, she was born there, so that makes sense.
I've read that, and also it just portrays all the women in the movie in Jerusalem as kind of like these Eastern exotic type of people. And where I've read that in real life they were actually would have worn very much Western clothing.
Oh, for sure.
Not like all that.
But
exotic
she was born
stuff.
there, so that kind of makes sense. But so the people from Europe were called the Franks. by the Muslims, even though the actual Franks have been dead for like 300 years. But that was their slang term for them, just like Saracens. So you had the Franks and the Saracens. And they were these rough, hardy northern people who, always shaved their beards, which the Muslims thought was weird. And what was I about to say? And they were just weird to him. You know what I mean? They were kind of like straight talking, sort of roughnecks sort of people who they saw as uncivilized, but they were tough as nails. But anyway,
all right, I think we should wrap up the history section before it goes too far.
First,
we gotta talk about arms, bro.
Oh no. First,
so now we got to talk about how accurate was the armor and costumes in the movie.
It was great. Here's the thing about the historical accuracy in this movie. A lot of it's not great, but what I love about the movie is that they really tried. They made a great effort, and any decisions that they made that deviated from history was made in the interest of the story.
Can I piggyback on that real quick?
Sure.
So my opinion on historical accuracy in historical movies is this. So I don't view historical inaccuracies as a negative of a movie. I think that if you want a complete historical account of something, go read a book. Yeah. Okay? I think that, and I think with movies like, what we've done, Braveheart, Kingdom of Heaven, we'll do The Patriot on Friday. All these movies have historical inaccuracies because they're movies. They're fiction. It's a fantasy, ultimately. They're all going to have fictional elements to them. And in this type of podcast, we can kind of harp on some of the historical inaccuracies and say, maybe they should have gotten this more accurate. But I don't think it's a negative of the movie because it's a movie. It's not a documentary.
I have a slightly different opinion on that.
Yeah, I know.
I understand that it's thematic and they have to make choices depending on the story.
That's like what Liam Neeson's
this is an Army cat. But on the flip side of that, I think that filmmakers have a duty to make it somewhat true to history.
Yes. No, I agree.
Because these days, not a lot of people read books anymore, and so these movies shape perception about facts a lot, and so they have a duty to be somewhat.
I do kind of agree with John. If you want a exact history, you got to read a book. The movie it's a movie.
So the movie has to be interesting. I mean, we already reviewed Braveheart, but like in a movie like that, or in a movie like this, or like The Patriot, or I think all these movies they utilize if they're going to be inaccurate, I think they should use those inaccuracies and those embellishments to deepen the story and use those inaccuracies and those historical embellishments to make the movie better. And I think that Kingdom of Heaven does that. I think Braveheart does that. I think The Patriot does that.
Well, there's two types of historical inaccuracies is the deal. The one type of historical inaccuracy is the one that's done out of laziness, where they're just like, I don't want to read, and it's just, it was probably like this and whatever. And those are the ones that are maddening. And then there's the ones that you can see were deliberately done by intelligent people because they needed to make the story.
Like, I think in this movie, the inaccuracy, where like Guy and Sibylla don't like each other, and Sibylla, has an affair with Balian, that works in the movie because it progresses the movie and creates conflict, which has to be resolved.
It doesn't happen.
So that's an historical inaccuracy. It did not happen. But in the movie, it works 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's my opinion on it. I don't view historical inaccuracy as a negative, unless, like you said, it's just complete laziness and it does nothing to progress the movie.
Yeah, so I get the argument that you need to create conflict, but a lot of times history has conflict of its own.
Yeah.
So
you did not like that, just for instance, that specific decision to have some...
Oh, no, I think that was fine. I think that was fine. I appreciate the movie for what it is, and like I said, I like it because they make a really good effort, and any decisions that they make were made out of interest in the story. So let's look at these pieces just real quick.
Yeah.
This is a Crusader Great Helm, which had just come into popularity in Western Europe. You see some of them in the movie. And
the Templar assassins wear those.
Yeah, and then there's the pot helm, which I don't have a pot helm, but this was worn with an arming cat, and was intensely uncomfortable to wear, but it was the most protective piece of head equipment that was available at the time. It made Western Knights virtually unkillable. The other thing that made Western Knights virtually unkillable was the male halberd. which this is the piece. There's no plate armor at the time. This was what was in use. This is butted mail. They would have been using riveted mail, but this can attack from stabs and slashes, not bludgeoning damage. It was so effective that it was actually a scandal in Western Europe, not in the Crusades because it was much more violent, but it was a scandal in Western Europe whenever a knight was killed in battle, because usually they would just kind of be beat up and then taken prisoner.
And then
you got the sword.
This bad boy.
So that's a long sword. You got out of frame. There you go. This is...
Here, try to kill me with it. I got the mail on.
You got the mail on? We're going to stab him.
Actually,
You see?
it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Come on, do it to him.
Let's see if we can kill John.
Let's just kill him on screen.
Oh god. This could be a little bit.
Wouldn't be nice to be stabbed either.
No. Dude, Bell, what about that? Oh, there's a really pretty gnarly scene where Balian gets like his wrist cut open.
Oh, yeah.
Remember he gets nailed. Dude with the chain mail,
This
bro.
is a gambeson. This is what was worn underneath the mail. Very hot, but also super effective against stabbing and slashing, but not bludgeoning damage. So the armament that the Western Europeans were using made one of their soldiers equal to many Muslim warriors, especially when they used proper tactics. The problem was it made them slow and hot in a area which they were not used to fighting in. They were used to fighting in cold climate, and so this made it difficult for them. But however, the experienced nature and the heavily armored nature of European soldiers is one of the defining reasons.
Me and John are just ready to play Nate's props. We're just ready to just
that Outremer held out for so long. Not because of the tactics, not because of any sort of strategic advantage. It was because of the quality of the individual soldiers. I have just a couple more pieces. This is a surcoat from a Knight's Hospitaller.
Oh yeah, this is like what the Hospitaller wears.
Yeah, this is the 8-pointed cross of St. John, who is the patron saint of the Knight's Hospitaller.
Tell us a little bit more about the Hospitallers while we're talking about it.
The order was founded in Jerusalem by this monk dude who wanted to make a hospital in Jerusalem because, you know, as you can tell from the movie, a lot of people died in Jerusalem, you know, and so they needed a hospital. And so this guy was like, hey, let's make a hospital. And they were like, great. This is a very abbreviated version. If you want to learn more, I love this book. It's an old book, but it's a great one, Knights of the Order by Ernell Bradford. But then, basically, I hate oversimplifying like this, but basically, the hospitals, because they started making more, started getting raided. And people in them started getting killed. And so they were like, this is a big problem. And they were looking over at the Knights Templar, who were also monks and soldiers, and were like, what about we do that? And so they're like, okay, let's do that. And so they formed a militant branch to protect their hospitals. But the cool thing about the Knights Hospitaller is that they never left behind their medical branch. It always was their number one priority. Although they did develop one of the most elite military forces in
your eyes too hot.
the world. But they also were the world's first humanitarian organization who brought, you know, quick relief to natural disasters. And they would end up fighting the Ottomans to protect Western Europe from invasion. So that's a very quick history of the Knights Hospitaller.
All right. I think at this point, we need to go ahead and move on to our final review.
Oh, one thing I have to point out that we talked a little bit about Baldwin IV. One actor I did not mention that gives a great performance is Edward Norton as Baldwin IV.
Yes.
He actually went uncredited he requested to be uncredited because since his face never appears, he said, well, why, just don't credit me. But he gives a great performance. It's this very calm and serene.
We really forgot Baldwin is one of the best characters in the whole movie.
And he's one of the best characters in history.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. What an incredible leopard king. But anyways, let's start with Nate for our final review of the movie.
This is one of the best movies ever made.
Oh, bro!
It is.
It's good.
It came in the high age of movies. You know, that period between 2000 and 2012, where movies were really good.
You keep on changing this. You said it was 1990 to 2011 last time.
Well, there's a general sweet spot between the 90s and the early
Oh, good. The Patriots in that sweet spot. That'd be fun.
The Lord of the Rings were there, The Patriot was there, Braveheart was there, this is there, Gladiator's there. All the good movies are there, basically. The Dark Knight, Master and Commander. So, like...
There's a lot of good movies.
So, but this movie is the crowning jewel.
Not the 80s.
Oh, and The Last Samurai is there, too.
Basically, all the good movies.
Yeah. All the ones that we reviewed. Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down is there also. We could just keep going. I think
Downfall.
There's
anyway, so what's your final? What are your final thoughts?
This movie not only has good themes, but it has an amazing story and is true to history, and so it is absolutely worth a watch. For the most part. It contends for my number one spot constantly with The Last Samurai, which is also a favorite of mine. You should totally go watch it and
watch our review.
And watch our review. Which, if you're watching this, you've already watched our review. So
maybe not.
Maybe they just watched this movie and watched it.
Okay.
Well, all right. Final review of the movie. It's great. Obviously, I love it. I think that it's a very enjoyable movie to watch. Extremely entertaining. Screenplay's really great. I can appreciate the cinematography, the acting, the script of the movie. Of course, if you study it too deep, obviously it falls apart a little bit. And obviously it's a Christian movie made by non-Christian.
I want to say Christian.
It's about Christian.
That's not what people. Yeah.
So I think that
but it's not like a Christian drama.
Well, the point is the Saracens and the Christians did this for religious reasons, and that's kind of.
But when you say Christian movie, people are gonna think like a 2010s like.
Oh, it's obviously not a Christian movie. Like Ridley Scott is not a Christian. No. But anyways, a little bit of the plot, like a little bit falls apart, and that's the only gripe I have.
And the character growth you said wasn't great.
But other than that, I love everything about this movie. It's very entertaining. I've got a lot of really good sequences. I just love the story of it, the battles, the characters. So overall, I think it's right there in one of the sweet spots in history. One of the best historical movies ever made. It's 10 out of 10 for me. I really love Kingdom of Heaven.
Mm-hmm. 10 out of 10 is perfect.
Well,
10's perfect.
Maybe it's like 9.5. It's not perfect.
10's perfect. So yeah.
I give Kingdom of Heaven a 9.7.
Okay.
It's just like, personally, I love it. Couldn't be better.
All right, so I'm obviously a little bit the Debbie Downer on this one. I love it. I still like this movie. It's still it's still one of my favorite historical movies. It's a great historical movie. It has a good story. I love the acting. Of all this, besides Orlando Bloom, I think he could have done a little bit better job. However, I think the writing of his character could have been better. But I think the writing overall, if you take out the romance between Balian and Sibylla and just Balian's character, I think the writing is very well done. I think William Monahan did a really good job. It's a good directing effort from Ridley Scott as usual. He just does a great job crafting these epic stories. He's just so good at epic filmmaking and just like crafting these larger than life type of stories that span years and like multiple countries, and it's just such an epic film. And I also just I love the battle scenes. There's all different types of battle scenes in this movie, and it's a good movie. I give it a solid 7.7 out of 10 for me. The character of Balian is not good. That's why it's down to a 7.7. The romance is not good. Other than that, I pretty much love everything else about this movie.
The 10 people who are in the comments hate on John. See if you think he's right or we're right. So give us your thoughts.
I like the movie. 7.7.
Well, we can all agree. Kingdom of Heaven.
Thumbs up.
It's great. We love it. You should watch it, and you should watch the rest of our reviews.
And stay posted for The Patriot. It will be coming out soon.
Yeah, and just guys, back off on all of the commenting and liking and subscribing. Like
we can't.
No, don't.
Yeah,
we can't handle all of it.
Like we can't respond.
I don't want to have to keep talking to the CEO of YouTube.
Yeah, for real. You got to give some space. Anyways, whatever our catchline is.
Been good.